Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Meet a Scientist live stream. We're coming to you live from the Youth BIOlab at the Albertson Research Center today at St. Boniface Hospital in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We're on Treaty 1 territory. It's the land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and it's also the homeland of the Métis Nation. We're really privileged to be safe and healthy right now, and we hope that we can keep it that way, and hope that you're doing really well too. In this week's weekly live stream, we get to have conversations with people from around the research center and learn a bit more about the work that goes on here, but we also get to learn a lot about the people that are actually doing the work. So today we're joined by Luis Cordero-Monroy, and he's a master's student in Dr. Carla Taylor's Metabolic Nutrition Lab, and also Peter Zaharadka's Molecular Physiology Lab. So he's kind of split between these two labs, working with two professors doing their own research. And he's going to share with us a little bit about what he does. So thank you for joining me today, Luis. I'm going to stop the share so you can actually see a little bit more of him. Hey. So welcome to our weekly live stream.
Thanks for having me.
So you're working in CCARM, studying foods now, and you're a master's student. So if you jump back to like Luis, grade 10 or 11 student in high school, like totally had your plan all figured out.
Totally, the plan figured out.
Yeah, everyone always does. What did you see yourself doing after, and what were the courses that you planned, and where did you, like in high school, where did you picture yourself working in the future?
Well, like when I was in high school, I was like pretty much like any other high school kid, just like no idea what to do, just like at a loss, struggling to figure out where do I go to university, do I go to college? So I ended up doing like a really spontaneous decision of signing up for like these cooking classes where I get to like start as an apprenticeship in like as a cook. So that was what I did. There was like a high school program that made that possible for me.
So you did it while you were still in high school?
While I was still in high school. It was a program specific to Ontario because I'm from Ontario.
Okay.
And for a semester, I literally did cooking classes every day.
And while you were taking other courses, or did you just get to work as a chef kind of?
I just pretty much like as a chef, yeah. Or like learning to be one or whatever. So I did that, and I was doing it, but I was kind of feeling like I missed science. Like maybe like one of the things where it's like, you don't know what you had till it's gone scenario. I don't know. And I really missed learning about science, and I had like these inherent curiosities that weren't being like really, tackled by me being a cook. So that's why I went back to high school. But I realized I love food though. So I wanted to make food like really important in my life. So I came to an agreement with myself to pursue like nutritional sciences. So I went back to high school, took all my sciences, and then applied to the University of Guelph, which is in Ontario, to enroll in the program for nutritional and nutraceutical sciences. It's a 4-year bachelor's degree. And I enjoyed my program. I enjoyed what I learned. I clearly, because I'm still in school, kind of pursuing, still learning, and still, developing and becoming a researcher, which I think is super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you go from studying? So you already have a really good background in nutritional sciences, and did you do any benchtop research type stuff while you were at Guelph, or did that kind of start more in your master's here?
It started my master's here. Yeah. I tried to get into like some courses that kind of would have allowed me to get some practice in it, but nothing works out as planned. So some plans fell through, but I did make an honest effort to do that, and I did end up making like some good connections with some professors, and we were able to talk a lot and form good connections, and they become really good references for me, and they helped me get to where I am now. So I really appreciate all they've done for me. Yeah, it's important to form those connections because they're just great people. Like it's awesome. Yeah.
Steve just jumped in on the chat. Yeah, so also for everyone watching, I'm also keeping my eyes on the chat so that if you have any questions, you can throw them in for Luis about anything, his path, or throw him a really hard curveball about metabolic nutrition. But Steve jumped in because he wants you to know that he's from Guelph too. So
Oh,
Steve
damn.
is one of the other
Nice, cool,
educators down here.
cool,
So
very cool.
yeah, and it's kind of neat. Like you can study health science anywhere and take it with you to do masters in different places. But it sounds like there are some programs offered in different universities that are a little bit more like he did a very specific health science degree and then started working here as a tech. And then you already studied, nutraceuticals in your undergrad. Maybe for those of us who aren't familiar with what these terms are, like what is nutraceuticals and how does that tie into the stuff that you're studying here?
So nutraceuticals is pretty much anything from anything that can be found in food. So like a dietary component, anything
Hmm.
that's found in food, that being taken out of that food matrix and being more like given to someone in like more of a pharmaceutical context. So maybe like a pill or something. That's why it is the term called a nutraceutical, a
Nutraceutical.
pharmaceutical nutrient.
Okay.
So any dietary component doesn't necessarily have to be a nutrient. So an example that I like to think of is resveratrol. Resveratrol from wine. So like there is some belief that resveratrol is what's responsible for some of wine's beneficial effects.
Hmm.
However, you had to drink like, I don't know, like 6 bottles of wine to get. You don't want to do that, right? So what you do is just
I
like
mean, you
take
might
the
want to, but
resveratrol.
there are other bad effects probably.
Yeah, yeah. If you just want the wheelchair, yeah. So just
Yeah,
take out
so
the
that's
wine.
when
Yeah.
that's available in pills now, right?
Hmm.
You can go to your same place that you get any vitamins or supplements and
Yeah, a
buy
multitude of
resveratrol.
things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Cool.
resveratrol is not considered like a nutrient, so it doesn't have to be a nutrient. It just has to be any kind of dietary component.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And so you've transitioned into your master's and that's at the U of M.
Yeah, U of M. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously things are different now with COVID-19 and like there's no in-class classes, but how does a master's work? Because you're here doing research, like you're
Hmm.
working in the lab on your own experiments, but you're also taking classes, right?
I fortunately finished all my classes before the pandemic hit.
Oh,
So
okay, nice.
I was literally like the semester right after I finished all my classwork and I was just doing focusing on laboratory work. And
Okay.
then yeah, and yeah, there was a little bit, but it wasn't very intensive. It was
Oh,
yeah, so I
so
did
what
have
do
to
you,
give like the remaining class that I had to do wasn't super like.
oh,
So it's a matter of like attending seminars, and at one point I had to present. So it was a matter of setting up a presentation and giving it online. So and that went
mhm.
okay. Yeah.
So during your master's though, what do the courses actually look like in university? Like, is that where you learn like, oh, this is how to design a research project, or this is how to apply for grant funding because somehow we have to pay for all this research? Like, what are the things that you actually learn in those courses? And then how does it translate into your lab work now?
So in the master's courses, it's been mostly general topics about nutrition, so vitamins,
Hmm.
lipids, micronutrients, etc. And then a lot of the classes were made so that we get to practice like research skills in order to be able to hopefully translate them into when we're actual researchers. So we had to give a lot of paper presentations, and we
Okay.
had to write a lot of articles like with the mindset of like imagine as if you were actually going to submit this paper for a publication, and then we're going to get plenty of like practice of that when we're writing our thesis, when we're
Mhm.
after we finish our experiments, and just because it's never ends. Like these presentations that you give, these papers you write, even if you're done like your courses, it it keeps on coming.
Well, and that's how like scientists share their information
Exactly, yeah,
in like real practice too. So,
for
and
sure.
the work that you're doing now, it might be part of your master's, but it's still contributing to both of the labs that you work between, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm a contributing member to our labs. Like, yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the cool aspects of doing your master's or PhD is you're in school, but you're also still like working on the actual science. So you
Mhm.
you kind of like named a few of the different areas that you could go into studying different nutrients or food compounds, and you've sort of gone down the path of looking at dietary fats.
Yeah.
And you kind of sent me a little bit of information, a few papers to look up, but overall kind of like the effect of these dietary fats on liver health. Can you talk a little bit more about, just for even in high school biology, sometimes the liver kind of gets glanced over really quickly. So can you do a bit of a review for us of, what is the liver doing in our body and how is it affected by some of the disease research that you're looking into?
Yeah, sure. So the liver is responsible for like a multitude of functions in our body. It's really important for maintaining glucose homeostasis. So making sure
Wait, simple words.
uh, for maintaining, regular blood sugar levels in your blood.
Yeah.
So just keeping them like within that narrow range in order for normal health. It is also important for, taking the lipids or fat from your diet and just repartitioning them out into your body. So it has a role in secreting what's called VLDL, very low density lipoproteins. And those are lipid rich and they are secreted out of the liver.
Is that a different word for the cholesterols? We hear like there's good cholesterol, bad cholesterol.
Essentially, yes.
Low
Yeah.
density lipoproteins.
I guess, yeah, that's scientific term, yeah.
Are those the good ones or the bad ones?
VLDL is considered to be a bad one.
Okay, and the high density are the good ones.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the liver kind of regulates all of that stuff. I'll share, while you're still talking, I'll just share my PowerPoint presentation again because I can help remind people then, where is the liver even and how does it fit in with the rest of our body system. So kind of up underneath your right rib.
Right. Yeah, it's located like inside your diaphragm on the right side of your body.
Now there's your diaphragm.
And
so it gets blood flow of all of the blood that's gone through the rest of the digestive system, picking up all of the things from your food gets filtered through the liver right away.
Right. Correct? So when you eat like any food, the first thing it sees once it gets digested is the liver.
Okay.
So all of the blood that flows from the small intestine, large intestine, will first flow into the hepatic portal vein, which is the vein that feeds directly into the liver. Okay. And then that liver will be able to monitor what's being eaten. It could look at, okay, there's so much glucose. How much do we actually need? And also any like xenobiotics. When I say xenobiotics, I mean just anything that the body doesn't recognize, like anything that's foreign.
So things that shouldn't be there, maybe, or
maybe it shouldn't be there. Yeah, it looks at them and and can make and start making processes so that it removes it out of the body.
Yeah, we hear about, I think the general idea that people hear about the liver's job is to detoxify things, like taking out. So it breaks down alcohol. It also breaks down drugs, medicine that we take. But it's also important in moving. I didn't realize it was that important in moving fats around the body. And that's kind of what you're studying now too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So can you talk a little bit more then about what happens to cause these problems related to the dietary fats?
Yeah, so I specifically studied non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So it's related to the fact that in say like in a person who's overeating, who doesn't really get a lot of exercise, is that with that prolonged condition of activity levels, the liver ends up accumulating a lot of fats because it's not being used up. There are problems going on with the fat cells too, where it's dumping a lot of fat into the liver, and that kind of just.
So like in the body's normal process, like our diets change all the time. Like right now, I've got a little bit more fat stored up than normal because I can't play hockey and stuff like I normally would. So, but it's not normal to have fat stored inside the liver, correct? Like it's normal to have like body fat
Yeah,
tissue covering, that's your adipose tissue whose job it is to hold fat. But so my understanding is like when the capacity gets maxed out in those tissues,
exactly. Yeah.
that's when it starts building up in these other parts of the body, like the liver.
Yeah. So the liver has like some capacity to hold on to liver and sorry, some capacity to hold on to lipids, but
Okay.
it comes to a point where these where these capacities are maxed out, as you said, and then what happens is fat just runs amok, where it just starts messing up with these processes that are normal for the liver. Yeah.
So yeah, and I did, if people want to go Google like non-alcohol related fatty liver disease, there are tons of images that you can come across, but this is just a diagram that I came across. It's like pretty, shows basically that there are like actual like big particles of
Mhm.
fat that you can that are visible to the eye, but it also causes other problems downstream to the other liver tissue aside from just having fat develop. So I'll stop the share now because that's a bit graphic. But like how big of a problem is non-alcohol related fatty liver disease, and like what are the outcomes for people? What's happening when your metabolism gets that dysregulated?
So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is the most common chronic liver disease right now.
Hmm.
And
More so than alcohol related
yes, more
liver
so.
damage?
Yes, yes. The
Okay,
thing is about
interesting.
alcohol related is that I think it's because there's more, it's more noticeable. But
You
uh,
mean the effects are significant enough that it can be treated sooner? Or
it I think just because the fact that alcohol related fatty liver disease has been, discovered a while ago, and then with
oh,
the the obesity epidemic, the increase of obesity rates worldwide, we start to notice there's a new problem, which is not
hmm,
related to alcohol, and that's why it's more and it's been under our noses for a while now that people are developing this condition, and we just don't notice,
hmm,
and it's becoming slowly becoming a serious problem that we have to tackle before it gets really bad.
mm-hmm. Okay,
So yeah, the it's starting to become the number one reason for liver transplants.
okay.
So it's on the rise. So it can get so bad where the person has to have the liver removed, and yeah,
So it affects the liver's um,
eventually,
capacity
yeah,
to do its other job of detoxifying,
eventually,
and that
yes,
can cause
yes,
other
yes,
problems around the
yeah.
body. This might not be a question that you know the answer to, but like we're like at a time in health science and our understanding of, like how obesity is often linked with other health outcomes, but
Mhm.
obesity itself isn't always like the cause of obesity isn't always directly like sedentary lifestyle food related. And there's also like a lot of stigma around, like body
That's very
size.
true. Yeah, yeah.
There's also new research that shows that like body size isn't directly correlated to mortality. So do you know, like, is there a parallel thing that like whatever is causing fat accumulation in other tissues also leads to fat accumulation in the organ? Or is it sort of like the obesity leads to the addition of fat into those other tissues? Does that make sense?
I'll try to answer your question. I think it's kind of well, yeah, that's true. The obesity doesn't really, or no, having like more fat or what, or doesn't
Yeah, more
really,
body fat.
more body fat doesn't mean that you're unhealthy. It just could mean that's how your body is. And there's a there it yeah, yeah, there not necessarily because um just because there's more body fat doesn't necessarily, translate to overall poor health. You had to look closer, deep into the how the fat tissues are, whether
Mm-hmm.
there are, some processes that are gone awry. You have to
Yeah,
look at the
the
individual
nuts and bolts
cells,
of,
not necessarily the size. It doesn't say everything, but is there inflammation going on in those adipose tissues, those fat cells?
oh,
Is there insulin resistance in those adipose tissues? You can have like minimal body fat and yet it being extremely unhealthy.
yeah.
Like the amount it doesn't really translate to poor health.
Yeah, okay. And it is true that like inflammation is also a thing that seems to underlie a lot of these conditions
For sure.
and insulin resistance and then it's like the improper placement of these fats that's kind of
Yes.
interfering with these other organs.
Yeah,
Um
exactly.
and also like even within like dietary fats that you're studying, it's not as simple as like eat less fat either. So can
Oh,
you
for
tell us
sure.
a little bit more about like what are the different fats involved and what are the specifics that you're looking at that might change health outcomes for people regarding non-alcohol related fatty liver disease?
Sure. So there are like so not all fats are the same. We have saturated fatty acids, monounsaturated fatty acids that come from say olive oil,
Mhm.
and then we have omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, omega-3 PUFAs. And so all of these contribute. All of these have like a distinct role in health. So there seems to be the hepatocyte, the liver doesn't seem to handle saturated fats very well. When
Okay,
you
and
take
those
like
would what would your sources of saturated fats be?
So they be normally come from animal fats. So any meats,
Okay.
uh, butter. These are all sources of saturated fats, and these are the kind of fats we should try to avoid. And
Or limit, right?
yeah,
Like,
limit.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
lots of people eat meat out there, and
I do too.
we, we can
Yeah,
all try to eat like
uh,
a little bit less.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, these fats don't seem to be tolerated as well by the liver.
Okay.
You'll see like a distinct effect when you take like a petri dish of liver cells and you give them like a shot of saturated fatty acids or a shot of like monounsaturated fatty acids. The cells will react differently. Where saturated
Hmm.
fatty acids, there'll be more inflammation, more
Interesting.
more more negative consequences for liver health. And
Huh.
compared to say like a monounsaturated fat like oleic acid that's found in olive oil.
Hmm.
And some fats have like even distinct effects for carrying out certain processes. So like these omega-3 polyunsaturated fats, they seem to be able to activate these processes in our liver cells where they favor fat burning over
Oh,
fat synthesis. So these
so
are
eating those like beneficial omega-3 fatty acids helps your body like use the fat as energy.
yeah, it so there's a like a balance in your liver going on between fat synthesis and fat burning. In the case of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the balance towards fat synthesis is higher. But there's been
Hmm.
studies showing where if you have like a diet higher with omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, it kind of changes the balance towards a more fat burning
Hmm.
profile.
Interesting.
So
Can
yeah,
you
sorry.
also like so fat like the fats that we ingest in our diet they get stored as fats, but it's true that like excess sugar energy also gets converted into fats, right, in
Yeah,
the
for
liver?
sure. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so both of those are involved, but eating the MUFAs and PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, monounsaturated fatty acids, those help burn all of the fats a bit better.
Omega-3 PUFAs, yes. Monounsaturated fatty acids seem to have like more of a neutral effect,
Oh,
where
okay, so
it's not
medium.
as deleterious as say saturated fatty acids.
Okay, so we're really interested in the omega-3s and omega-6s in your lab, correct?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your study then?
Okay. So my study involves non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and So first it was first like piggybacked on the different experiments where we were researching this other fat called trans-10 cis-conjugated linoleic acid. Um, so these so these mice were given a diet with this specific fatty acid, and what happened is that they had severe fat mass loss. So they lost a lot of fat.
But is that bad sometimes? Like losing significant amount of fats really quickly, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Okay.
And uniquely, what happened was like coincidentally, the liver started, becoming steatotic. It gained a lot of fat. So it almost seems like there was like a switch from like fat storage in the adipose tissue, the fat cells, to the liver. So
that's very weird.
I'm researching like what had changed in the liver in order for it to become more receptive to storing fat inside.
I'll share you sent me a slide. I'll share it with people again so that they can kind of see that process, just looking at the actual tissue level, that you can actually see those changes. So the liver's kind of like a bunch of tubules all in a big mesh, right? Because there's a lot of blood flow going through. And so it's really like a big kind of filtration system.
Right.
And you use the word hepatic steatosis.
Hepatic steatosis, yeah.
Steatosis. Okay. Yeah. What is that and what's happening here?
So it's the scientific term for increased accumulation of fat inside the liver. So the cell type that mainly like makes up the liver are hepatocytes. Okay. So when I say hepatic, I'm referring to hepatocytes, which are in the liver. So hepatic steatosis is when they accumulate a lot of fats. And what you see here, as you show.
Yeah, with the little green arrow here. Those are actual fat droplets.
So what happens is so this is like a very small section of a liver. So it's like a very fine cut. And throughout the process of like staining it with all these stains in order to give it that nice pink and blue color, the lipid droplets actually get dissolved in it.
So so they're washed off.
Are washed off. So they represent where the lipid droplets were.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what happens next? Like, so it starts with just accumulating more fat within the hepatocytes themselves?
Yeah, within the hepatocyte cells, yeah.
Okay. And then what happens? If it doesn't, like if the conditions don't change and we're still sedentary, eating higher fat diets or excess energy, what are the things that follow?
So if this like situation persists, like with the environment with a lot of fatty acids, it kind of favors a really dangerous inflammatory situation where there is harmful byproducts being spit up everywhere, and then that ends up with the cell becoming apoptotic. When I say apoptotic, is that it's programmed cell death. So these hepatocytes, they start to
self-destruct.
Yeah, they self-destruct, exactly. Okay. So in that image you see like one of those hepatocyte cells just being blown up.
So these little bubbles are those the fat droplets or
so
apoptotic bodies?
So the one right in the middle is an apoptotic body, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so sometimes that's a thing, like for anyone who's watched some of our other research, apoptotic bodies show up in heart disease, also in heart muscle cells that are self-destructing after a heart attack. So it's sort of, similar processes break down cells in different tissues when those cells aren't working properly anymore.
Right.
And then what happens to the liver?
So with all this hepatic cell death and all this inflammation going on, the liver is usually pretty good at regenerating and recovering after all these injuries. But even the liver has a limit where it's not able to regenerate some of these liver cells that have died. So what instead happened is that there starts like this scar tissue being formed in place of where these hepatocytes were. And then that's where you get these like this fibrosis developing inside on the liver. So it's kind of just as a they, uh, trying to like patch up all these dead cells. Yeah.
Is cirrhosis the scarring? Is that the name for scarring of the liver, or is that a different process? Because sometimes you hear of liver cirrhosis sometimes.
I actually don't know.
Okay.
the
Either way, there's lots of scar tissue developing. And
Mhm.
then you've said too, like we kind of emailed back and forth before, but is there a connection between this inflammation process and liver cancer? Like, is there a potential for that lifestyle or those, like genetic factors that might affect lipid metabolism? Is there a risk for cancer because of this?
Yeah, there's been a lot of like observational studies where people with fatty liver have an increased risk for developing liver cancer or hepatocellular carcinoma. The reasons aren't very well defined yet. That's what we are working on right now.
Okay.
And yeah, so this situation with like all this reactive oxygen species, all this inflammation is going to cause damage to these cells and ultimately their DNA. And these alterations to the DNA may lead to the rise of tumor cells. So yeah.
Okay, so your lab is now looking at these specific fatty acids, like very specific chemical compounds from these different types of fats that might be able to prevent this. And I grabbed a little table from one of the papers that Luis sent me just to get a sense of, how hard it is to design an experiment and make sure that everything is the same. It's really hard to get people to participate in these diet related experiments because it involves eating the same thing all of the time, controlling what's in the food, and then only changing the very particular things that you want to study. So this is like rat diet.
Yeah.
So they get a mix of like egg whites and some fiber and some sugars and starches and all their vitamins and minerals. So this would be like the constants that stay the same. And then these are things that your lab has studied previously. Are these all examples? So LA, ALA, EPA, DHA, are all of those omega-3 or 6 fatty acids combination?
So ALA, EPA, and DHA are omega-3.
Okay.
And the LA, linoleic acid, is an omega-6 fatty acid.
Okay.
So what's different between these fats is the positions of their double bonds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're just like they're a long molecule and they have a kink in them. But
exactly,
whether it's close to or far away from the head of the chain, that's kind of.
Yeah. So when I say omega-3, the 3 refers to how many carbon positions away from the tail end. Is it from the yeah. Okay. And when I say omega-6, it means it's 6 carbon points away from the tail end.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those are all of the variables, the different types of oils that they're being fed. And you in your work right now, you said you're studying DHA specifically?
I'm researching the trans 10 cis 12 conjugated linoleic acid. So it's not included in this diet here.
Oh, something totally different.
It's something separate.
Where are those fats found in nature?
Yeah. So these fats are found from ruminant food sources. So like beef, milk. They're only present at low amounts though. The reason that they got picked up and they wanted to do research in it was that they found like a specific fat from beef, and they tried to see if it had any effects for cancer in a mouse model, cancer mouse model, and they found that it did. It actually reduced the amount of tumors in a chemically induced in a mouse that had tumors induced by a chemical. So they kept on researching this, and so they wanted to synthesize it. So they want to synthesize this specific fat. However, when they synthesized it, they accidentally got 2 different types of molecules.
Here, I'll stop sharing. So
sure.
See your face now.
They ended up with 2 different types of molecules.
Okay.
And one of them was the trans 10 cis 12 conjugated linoleic acid that I was talking about.
Okay.
And the other one was the one that's mostly found in food. So they're actually giving this combined dietary supplement to these mice. And when the mice would start eating them, they found out they had severe fat mass loss.
Hmm.
And then later on, it was discovered that it was specifically the trans 10 cis 12 conjugated linoleic acid part of this fat that was doing the effects.
So the one that's not actually found in nature, the one that only appeared in the synthetic
Exactly.
variety?
Yeah, it's present in nature at a very low amount. So it's not really significant for a diet. So they found out that this was doing all these effects. And it was very, like, these effects were pretty severe. So it's worth investigating. Like, what is it doing exactly?
So it's bad for the mouse because they lost lots of weight immediately. But are they trying to investigate, like, is there a potential good effect if we use it really specifically?
Yeah, so there is a lot of like effects. There was a lot of bad effects that are associated with it. But I think it's worthwhile to investigate what physiologically is happening in order to see. Yeah.
So you use that fat on the liver specifically to see if you could interrupt this fat droplet accumulation?
What ends up happening is that it increases hepatic lipid droplet formation.
Okay, so less body fat, more lipid fat.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah.
Okay, and so you're trying to figure out what's going on. I'll share again. I know it's a lot of back and forth jumping to the sharing and whatnot, but this is Luis's actual study of some mouse liver. And so, the first, you can explain it because it's your work. What are we looking at here?
So we have a normal mouse, and we take that liver section. So we take a very narrow slice of that liver, and then we put a stain on it. So this stain will directly bind with lipid droplets.
Okay.
So
there's two stains though, right? Because the one in the top picture of the normal mouse liver, those blue, that's not the lipid droplet, is it?
those are nuclei. So we're using two stains. So one of them is a nuclei stain, and the other one is a lipid droplet stain. So you can see with the mouse that's being fed this trans 10 cis 12 conjugated linoleic acid that I'm talking about, there is a lot more lipid droplet formation, which is represented by the green blobs.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a ton. You can kind of see them in the light microscope picture that are all gray. Like you can see the droplets, but that fluorescent green stain that binds specifically to the fat. So the brighter they are, the bigger they are, the more fat there is.
For sure.
So what are the next steps from here? Like if you know that particular type of fat causes lipid accumulation in the liver, what do you do with that information?
So now we know that it's increasing lipid accumulation in the liver. Now it's time to look at the specific processes of how it's increasing, like what enzymes are being increased in order to facilitate increased lipid droplet formation. What are other things going on? Is there insulin resistance in these cells that contribute to this? Just like figuring out how and why these fat lipid droplets are forming,
and then interrupt them somehow.
Hopefully,
that's cool.
Cool. With different bioactives, maybe DHA or EPA, as you mentioned before, that these may have a role in reducing them. Like, as I said, encourage fat burning in order to get rid of these lipid droplets and hopefully create a more healthy hepatocyte, a healthy liver.
Cool. Foods are so complex. It's amazing that you can, you want to take this one thing out and see what it does, but then when you mix it back in with all of the other things in that original food source, you see that those are all probably like all of those ingredients, all the different types of fats in that natural food, they're probably interacting with each other that makes them affect your body totally differently. So, but hopefully it leads to something that actually helps with, um, prevention of that steatosis in the liver.
Yeah, if we know what processes are being activated that allow for hepatic steatosis to occur, now we know which pathways we need to target.
Yeah, it's always
So
about
now
finding
that we know that, we can figure out, okay, say this specific enzyme is being upregulated, and that usually that coincides with hepatic steatosis. So let's figure out a way how to target it with some kind of treatment, whether it be a diet or pharmaceutical or anything.
Cool. Yeah. So trying to figure out the very detailed why is this happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, I think that I've taken up a lot of your time, but I'm going to quickly ask you, just as a bit of a wrap up, like, what are some of your favorite parts of working in science?
For me, it's being able to see like science come to life right in front of you. Because like when you're in school, you're always reading textbooks and these topics do seem kind of vague, and like you look at yourself, it's like, is this really happening? And then like, but when you go into the lab, you see them every day. Like you see these concepts being proven right before you, and I just think that's like my favorite part of being in the lab, because you get to see these really cool, interesting ideas being brought to life. And also being able, like learning, being competent and becoming a researcher, like being able to prove that this pathway is active, being able to prove that this helps reduce a certain activity. I find it really rewarding, and constantly learning. It's really cool.
Yeah, learning how to learn even is part of the learning. Like, how do we figure this stuff out?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
How do we learn about the different types of cells that are involved? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, what's your trajectory from being a master's student?
I'm more of like the kind of go with the flow kind of guy. So I just really like, after leaving university undergrad, I felt like a strong urge to continue learning. Like that's what I wanted to do after finishing my undergrad. Like I feel like I loved what I learned. Like I think my program really prepared me really well for this discipline, really great. But I still felt like I needed to learn more. So that's why I ended up pursuing a master's degree, because I want to become more competent. I want to become a real researcher. And so after this master's degree, I feel like it's not going to stop.
Yeah, there's always so much out there to learn. I did get one more question in the chat just before I wrap up. Brianne Semenko wanted to know, some people take CLA supplements for weight loss. So it's conjugated linoleic acid as a weight loss supplement. What are your thoughts on that?
So there's been clinical studies looking at people taking trans-transistal conjugated linoleic acid.
So the one that you're studying on mice?
Yeah. And there seems to be very limited results. There is some reduction in adiposity, but it's not very significant. Very rarely it leads to actual reduction in BMI.
Does it affect the liver?
Yes. There are some side effects where there is increased insulin resistance, increased indication of liver dysfunction.
So that kind of would work against the end goal, right?
Yeah,
if you have insulin resistance,
perhaps you are losing some adiposity, you are losing some fat mass, but at a price of liver health. So all of these things are connected. So when you try to mess around with some processes in the fat cells, you're going to mess around with processes in different other organs. Organs talk to each other constantly. And you affect one and you affect the other, especially for the adipose cells and the livers. They're constantly talking to each other. And then a lot of other organs are too. So we have to keep that in mind when we think about these treatments.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's another thing that a lot of people miss when we're learning about body fat and fat tissue is that it isn't an organ that does a lot of jobs, and it communicates with lots of other parts of our body. So
For sure.
trying anything too weird or whatever to manipulate it can cause downstream effects somewhere else. Okay, well, I think that we've taken up more time than I intended to, but thank you very much for joining us for our weekly Meet a Scientist. I'll just sign off with everyone by saying thank you also to our viewers for joining us, and you can join us next week to learn more about the research that we do here at the Albertson Research Center. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates. You can also check us out at youthbiolab.ca or follow us on Youth Biolab on Twitter and Instagram. And thank you all for watching. Stay curious.